A music executive and community activist is accused of running a criminal empire in Los Angeles. Eugene Henley Jr. facing RICO charges, allegedly tying him to the notorious Rollin' 60s street gang.
The federal government usually does not bring these types of charges unless they've done extensive investigation. It looks like he has been under investigation for several years.
It's almost impossible to overstate the sheer audacity of Eugene "Big U" Henley's double life. To the outside world, he was the quintessential reformed figure, a man who had risen from the shadows of his troubled past to become a beacon of hope in South Los Angeles. He was celebrated as a mentor, a music executive, and a community activist who had supposedly traded the chaos of gang life for the pursuit of peace and prosperity. But behind the carefully curated image, federal investigators allege, was an entirely different story. A story of control, manipulation, and power that spanned years and left a trail of victims in its wake.
Music executive and alleged LA gang leader Eugene Henley Jr. is heading to trial. Last month, he was named in a 43-county federal indictment, and this afternoon, he pleaded not guilty during his arraignment. Prosecutors accuse Henley of running a criminal enterprise involving human trafficking, robbery, and extortion. They also say Henley, known as Big U, has ties to the notorious Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips street gang.
Let's start with the public persona. Big U was a man who seemed to have all the right connections. He had a history of working with Nipsey Hussle, one of South LA's most celebrated cultural icons. He was photographed with NBA legends like Shaquille O'Neal and Draymond Green, rubbing elbows with the kind of figures that could lend credibility to anyone's name. His nonprofit, Developing Options, was portrayed as a lifeline for at-risk youth, a program designed to steer kids away from gangs and violence. He was even involved in the city's gang reduction youth development program, receiving grants from the mayor's office to fund his supposed activism.
Disheartened by the fact that they're trying to say that I stole something from Developing Option, or I used Developing Option as a front.
But the image of Big U as a savior was, according to federal prosecutors, nothing more than an elaborate facade. While he was presenting himself as an agent of change, the government claims he was quietly running a sprawling criminal enterprise. And not just any enterprise, a mafia-like organization, as investigators describe it, with tentacles that reach deep into the entertainment industry, the streets of Los Angeles, and even the city's political circles. To those who crossed him, Big U wasn't the smiling community leader he portrayed on Instagram. He was a man who commanded fear and respect through sheer force of will. And allegedly, violence.
Good evening. We've been following this story throughout the day. Federal officers arrested more than a dozen members tied to the gang known as the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips, though its leader was on the run. Well, within the last 20 minutes, the FBI announcing that man, Eugene Henley Jr., a.k.a. Big U, is now in custody.
The heart of his operation, prosecutors say, was intimidation. If you wanted to do business in Los Angeles, especially in entertainment or high-profile industries, you didn't do it without Big U's blessing. And that blessing didn't come for free. His so-called check-in system was a simple but effective racket. Visiting celebrities, athletes, and businessmen were expected to pay for protection during their time in the city. The implication was clear. If you didn't pay, you might find yourself at the mercy of the very dangers Big U claimed to shield you from. It was a protection scheme dressed up as a favor, and for years, it worked. The FBI alleges that this system wasn't just about extorting money. It was also a way for Big U to consolidate his influence. By forcing people to check in, he created a network of individuals who were beholden to him. And once you were in his orbit, it wasn't easy to get out. Federal wiretaps and interviews paint a picture of an operation where loyalty was non-negotiable and defiance came with severe consequences. Celebrities and athletes who thought they could bypass the system were often met with public humiliation or worse.
He was incredible, whether it was a 7-year-old child or a 50-year-old former gang member coming out of incarceration. His ability to communicate and relate was excellent. If these charges are true, because they're still allegations, they are not a done deal, they're allegations. If they're true, then Eugene Henley was somebody who presented two faces to this world.
But perhaps the most shocking part of this story is how deep the deception went. Big U's nonprofit, Developing Options, wasn't just a philanthropic front. It was allegedly a financial pipeline for his criminal activities. According to the indictment, he used the study to embezzle millions, funneling money from well-meaning donors straight into his personal accounts. And these weren't just small-time contributions. We're talking about massive donations from major figures, NBA players, award-winning companies, and even city grants meant to uplift the community. It's alleged that Big U took every penny he could, all while maintaining the image of a man who cared deeply about the people around him. The scope of this fraud is staggering. From 2018 to 2023, Developing Options received over $2 million in funding through Los Angeles' Gang Reduction Youth Development Foundation. The program was supposed to reduce gang violence and provide opportunities for at-risk youth, but investigators claim much of that money never made it to the community. Instead, it lined Big U's pockets, funding his lifestyle and insulating his organization from scrutiny. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Federal agents allege that celebrities and corporations were coerced into donating to the nonprofit, only to have their contributions disappear into Big U's ever-growing empire.
Your story in here starts with how you got involved in the Rolling 60s set, correct?
Yeah, well, pretty much we tried to tell everybody's backstory on how the question is hip hop and how did hip hop start, and that's 1979, and then it was 1979 for LA was such a tumultuous year, meaning that with the Crips, that's when Raymond Washington, who created the Crips, 1979.
And here's the kicker: he was so good at playing both sides that even those closest to him seemed to believe the facade. City officials sang his praises, awarding him contracts and grants. Celebrities aligned themselves with him, believing they were supporting a worthy cause. And the public? They saw a man who had turned his life around, a symbol of redemption in a city often plagued by stories of violence and corruption.
It's First Street. It might be I don't know if it's to the right or the left.
Reach out to anybody who can help me, y'all.
You hear me?
Help my own family. Appreciate y'all. Go.
But behind the scenes, the cracks were beginning to show. Whispers of impropriety swirled around Developing Options for years. Donors started to ask questions about where their money was going. Social media posts accused Big U of exploiting his nonprofit for personal gain. And then there was the matter of his rising tension with fellow Los Angeles figures, including high-profile rival Whack 100. The two had long been at odds, trading barbs on podcasts and social media, but as the FBI investigation ramped up, their feud took on a darker tone. Big U accused Whack of conspiring against him, even suggesting that Whack had cooperated with federal agents to bring him down. Whether or not that's true remains to be seen, but what's clear is that Big U's carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble.
And in LA, hip hop hit at the same time. The violence in LA hit with Crippin'. And so, yeah, it was almost like if you was going to Horseman, it was no way you was not going to be involved in gangs.
And so at that time, you was just coming up. You was young. How old were you?
Shit, 12?
12.
I think you're about 12.
The turning point, according to prosecutors, came in 2021. That's when federal investigators began to zero in on Big U's alleged involvement in a series of high-profile crimes, including fraud, extortion, and the disappearance of a rising musician under suspicious circumstances. This wasn't just about financial impropriety anymore. It was about dismantling a network that had operated with impunity for over a decade. And as the investigation deepened, the scope of Big U's alleged empire became impossible to ignore. What makes this case so compelling and so chilling is the sheer audacity of it all. Big U didn't just operate in the shadows, he flaunted his influence. He appeared on podcasts, gave interviews, and even participated in a docuseries where he spoke about his past and his efforts to reform. To outsiders, he was a man who had turned his life around. But to those in the know, he was still the same power player he had always been. Only now, he was smarter, more calculated, and far more dangerous.
After that is, in 79, after that, 12, 13, you're going to have a gun. Or you're going to get one. You start carrying a gun to school, putting it in their locker. They start raiding the lockers, and you trying to steal your uncles, your auntie, moms, whoever had one, because you had to have it going to school.
And yet, for all his cunning, the walls were closing in. Federal agents claim they've built an airtight case against him, using everything from wiretapped phone calls to financial records to witness testimonies. They say they've uncovered a pattern of behavior that paints Big U not as a reformed man, but as a master manipulator who used his status to exploit, intimidate, and control. And now, as the charges pile up, the question isn't just how far Big U's influence reached, it's how many people helped him along the way. But even as the allegations mount, Big U remains defiant. In the days leading up to his arrest, he posted a series of videos on social media calling the charges against him garbage and accusing his rivals of using the justice system to settle personal vendettas. He insisted he was innocent, a victim of gossip and jealousy, and vowed to fight the accusations with everything he had. But as the evidence continues to pour in, it's becoming harder and harder to believe the man who once claimed he had left his old life behind. Because if the federal government is right, Eugene Henley didn't just fool the city of Los Angeles, he fooled the world. And the next chapter of his story might be the most shocking yet.
And when you look back on that time, right, like now, you know, you and I have talked, and we talk about what was going on with, you know, housing, jobs, you know, what was creating the environment around that, why the hustling, why the drug dealing, why the sets were so important, why so many people were buying drugs, why there was violence, you know, why all of this stuff was happening when you...
And just when you thought the story couldn't get darker, the revelations plunge even deeper. The accusations against Eugene Big U Henley aren't just about money or schemes. They paint a picture of a man who didn't just build an empire, but fortified it with fear, manipulation, and a brazen disregard for the law. The real-world consequences of his alleged actions go far beyond the headlines. What we're looking at here isn't just a scandal. It's a blueprint for how power, unchecked and unchallenged, can corrupt everything it touches. The so-called Big U enterprise, as investigators have labeled it, wasn't just a collection of schemes. It was a system, a machine. It operated with ruthless efficiency, leveraging every connection, every opportunity, every moment of goodwill to advance its reach. And when that goodwill ran out, that's when the intimidation kicked in. Beneath the surface, Big U's operation was allegedly built on a foundation of threats, coercion, and an uncanny ability to make people disappear, figuratively and in some cases quite literally. The more you dig, the clearer it becomes that this was never just about survival or redemption. This was about dominance.
Yeah, definitely it's poverty. I was just having this conversation with my homeboy the other day, and and I'm gonna be on the opposite side of this so-called world. If would have never hit California, and it wouldn't hit the East Coast, we would have still been in a bad situation. Did not create a bad situation for inner city use. It was the condition of America.
Take, for example, the way Big U allegedly handled dissent within his circle. According to federal wiretaps, loyalty wasn't optional, it was mandatory, and when someone stepped out of line, there were consequences. Witnesses have claimed that Big U would use his reputation alone to silence dissenters. People didn't just follow his rules because they respected him, they followed because they feared what would happen if they didn't. And for those few brave or foolish enough to cross him, well, let's just say their careers, and sometimes their lives, never quite recovered. But the most chilling part, this wasn't confined to the streets. Big U's influence bled into every corner of Los Angeles. From the boardrooms of entertainment executives to the local politicians who handed out grants, his reach was staggering. The federal investigation uncovered evidence suggesting that Big U didn't just exploit his charity for personal gain, he used it as a smokescreen, a way to position himself as untouchable. How could someone accused of orchestrating such chaos also be the man championing youth programs and anti-violence initiatives? That contradiction was his greatest weapon. It allowed him to walk freely between two worlds, collecting allies in both and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake.
We was excuse lack for a better term, we was in a situation regardless. Our living conditions were atrocious. Before a lot of people's living conditions improved more. But if you go back and you look at the era, if you look at 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, we didn't own houses. The streets were terrible. These houses were terrible.
But the cracks in the facade started to widen. And when they did, the revelations came pouring out. One of the most shocking details involves the systemic extortion of high-profile figures. Federal documents allege that Big U created an unspoken rule in Los Angeles. If you wanted to operate in his city, you had to pay tribute. And this wasn't about small favors or friendly collaborations. This was about cold, hard cash. And the consequences of non-compliance were anything but subtle. Celebrities, athletes, and even industry executives were reportedly strong-armed into handing over money for protection. And here's the kicker. In some cases, the very threats they were paying to avoid were orchestrated by Big U's own network. It was a self-sustaining cycle of fear and profit, and for years it worked. One former associate, speaking under the condition of anonymity, described the operation as organized chaos. According to the source, Big U had a way of making everyone around him feel both indispensable and expendable at the same time. He could make you feel like you were part of something bigger, they said, but the second you stopped being useful, you were out. No explanations, no second chances. And if this associate is to be believed, that mentality extended to everyone, from the lowest members of his alleged network to the high-profile celebrities who found themselves caught in his orbit.
The thing is a convenient narrative to place the blame on the victims.
Yes, when I think about it and I go back and I play it back in my head, I definitely do.
And let's talk about those celebrities. The list of names tied to Big U is long and growing. From major athletes to platinum-selling artists, his connections were as impressive as they were suspicious. And while investigators have stopped short of accusing these individuals of any wrongdoing, their proximity to Big U raises serious questions. Were they complicit? Were they victims? Or were they simply pawns in a game they didn't even realize they were playing? The truth is, we may never know. But what we do know is that Big U leveraged these relationships to further his own agenda, using their fame and influence as a shield against scrutiny. Take the case of a prominent NBA player who reportedly donated tens of thousands of dollars to developing options, believing he was supporting a legitimate cause. What he didn't know, investigators allege, is that those funds were quietly funneled into Big U's personal accounts. And it wasn't just athletes. Music industry insiders have come forward with stories of being pressured into working with Big U or else. One producer, who asked to remain anonymous, described a meeting in which Big U allegedly made it clear that refusing his terms wasn't an option.
This is my last video before I turn myself in. I'm with my family. Talk to my sons, I talk to everybody, man. I'm just saying, gonna deal with this fight, see what it is. I just want y'all to know.
And then there's the matter of Nipsey Hussle. While Big U has long touted his role in mentoring the late rapper, the relationship between the two was far more complicated than he let on. Sources close to Nipsey have suggested that their partnership was fraught with tension, particularly in the years leading up to Nipsey's tragic end. And while there's no evidence linking Big U to that specific incident, the allegations surrounding his broader activities cast a dark shadow over their history. Did Nipsey see through the facade? Was he a threat to Big U's operation? Again, these are questions that may never be fully answered, but they add another layer of complexity to an already tangled web. And it's not just Nipsey. Other artists who had ties to Big U have found themselves caught in his gravitational pull, unable or unwilling to break free. In some cases, it's because they genuinely believed in his vision. In others, it's because the cost of leaving was simply too high. One artist, speaking on the condition of anonymity, described Big U as the kind of guy who could make you feel like you owed him, even if you didn't. And once you were in his debt, real or imagined, there was no getting out.
I just need y'all prayers. I need y'all to... I don't even know what to say. Now, 21 years, I've elevated my family, come back, sit in here and write and do what I need to do until I can come back home.
But what about the people who dared to challenge him? What about the ones who refused to play by his rules? According to federal investigators, they didn't fare much better. In one particularly chilling case, a business owner who declined to check in with Big U found their shop targeted by vandals just days later. Coincidence? Maybe. But when that same business owner received a visit from one of Big U's associates offering protection for a fee, the message was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a game, it was a system, and for years, it operated in plain sight.
People are supposed to help me, I hope you help me. If you can't, you don't worry about it. A lot of stuff y'all hearing is straight trash. And I appreciate the love, and I appreciate the people who've been helping me. I don't know. It's hard helping black people and not being hunted for doing it.
So where does this leave us? With more questions than answers, to be sure. How did Big U maintain this double life for so long? Who else was involved, knowingly or otherwise? And perhaps most importantly, how far does this rabbit hole go? Because if the allegations are true, and let's not forget they're still just allegations, then we're not just looking at a scandal, we're looking at a reckoning. A moment of truth for everyone who turned a blind eye, who bought into the facade, who enabled the man behind the mask. But what do you think? Is Big U the mastermind investigators claim he is? Or is he just another victim of the system he tried to escape? Are we witnessing the fall of an empire or the framing of a man who dared to dream too big? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, stay tuned because this story is far from over.